Good evening, everyone. My name is Councillor Tumi Hawkins. I'm the lead cabinet member for Planning Policy and Development Management at South Cambridgeshire District Council. I want to welcome everyone to the third and final Airfield Development Community Forums for Cambourne and Bourn for 2022. SCDC facilitates several community forums for new neighbourhoods rising from growth in South Cambridgeshire. These bring residents, councils, developers, and other stakeholders together to raise issues and discuss how developments are moving forward. And forums provide an opportunity for discussion and information sharing that are not part of the formal planning process. Now, following the consultation process last year, South Cambs agreed to host 3 back-to-back forums, followed by a review. There will be a slight variation of this format this evening. We start with an update on planning issues concerning Cambourne, Bourn, and surrounding areas, then move on to Cambourne Forum and finish with Bourn Forum. I'll ask that you please help improve the forum by completing the Zoom questionnaire, which will pop up when you leave. You can use questions to inform our review. The forum is being recorded and will be shared on our website, where we'll also provide answers to questions that cannot be answered this evening. I want to say thank you to community advisors, parish chairs, Joe O'Dwyer and Denzel Brand, who have helped us to shape the agenda for tonight's forums. If there are any members present who would like to be announced, please write your name in the Q&A section, and I will do that as soon as I get them. Now, for the questions and answers section, the questions will be taken in 2 ways. By the Q&A function on Zoom, first one, and raise hand function if you wish to ask your question verbally. Please use the raise hand function and one of the teams will let me know and we will allow you to talk. But please ask 1 or 2 questions per invitation. Only your voice will be recorded. Okay. And also, please do ask questions only so that we can hear from as many people as possible. And any comments or statements you have, please share those via the forum email address, which is south.west@cams.gov.uk. So let's start tonight's forum this evening with our shared planning section. First, we'll hear a brief planning roundup from Stephen Kelly, who is the Joint Director of Shared Planning Service, and followed by an update on the new Greater Cambridge Local Plan by Caroline Hunt. And next will be Joe Baker of the Greater Cambridge Partnership, providing an update of the Cambourne to Cambridge project and making connections. So, shall we start with Stephen Kelly, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Tumi, and hopefully people can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Good, good. It says unmute myself in the middle of the screen, so I'm hoping that that's still working. Several updates this evening from me. Caroline Hunt is going to follow with a bit of an update around the local plan, but I thought it helpful just almost in many respects as a reminder just to check where we are on the key schemes in case you haven't heard. So you will be aware that the A428 Black Cat to Caxton Gibbet development consent order scheme achieved, it was granted consent, but is now subject to an application for permission for judicial review by third parties in respect of 3 particular matters. We're expecting over the next few weeks that the first hearing for that in terms of consideration as to whether it gets permission for JR will take place, and depending upon the outcome of that, either the case will proceed for consideration or it will be dismissed, there is a right to request then a further, in the event that it is dismissed, to request a further hearing on the judgment. The upshot of it all is that the anticipated start date was originally going to be early in 2023. That may well slip, but it's dependent upon the outcome of the High Court challenge. In the meantime, we're advised that works are, the team are still working on the presumption of development consent order proceeding, but we haven't got a revised timetable at this moment in time around that. Following all of the excitement nationally around infrastructure through the budget for growth that was announced at the recently in September, and then the consequent activities subsequently to that, there hasn't been a further update that I've got for you on the East West Rail project. I noticed that yesterday East West Rail placed online a marker really of some of the engagement that they've been undertaking, referring to their meeting in Cambourne over the last few months to discuss the scheme. But as yet, we have no further, more detailed news about that particular project and whether it's going to proceed or not. Clearly, there's a autumn statement due very shortly, and we'll be looking carefully to see what the implications of that are for the Greater Cambridge, but particularly for the East West Rail project. So the main thing I wanted to just share with people today is, as a consequence of departures in the shared planning service that took place in the spring, I wanted to just clarify, because I have had some inquiries about it, who is working in the planning department at the moment. We've got some interim arrangements in which we've organised ourselves into, for planning application purposes, into 2 area teams. Details of those area teams can be found on the Shared Planning Service website, and I will make sure that the notes include a direct link to that, because I have been asked who to contact in respect of queries around development in this locality. But for information, we have a temporary manager in place called Phil McIntosh. Actually Phil did work in South Cambs previously, but he's covering the absence associated with Nigel Blaisby, who is our development manager. His illness means that he's not available to be in work. And following Julie Ayres' departure from the Shared Planning Service, some of you may remember Julie, who was one of the team leaders, we have recruited a permanent replacement for Julie in Rebecca Smith, who joined us from a London borough, very experienced, 15+ years of being a team leader in a London borough, very experienced planner, who's now heading up the West team, as it's called, and those 2 people, together with the team of case officers, can be seen on the web link that I'll share with you. In terms of other news from the Shared Planning Service, just one piece to keep an eye out for really is that we've been doing quite a lot of work thinking around enforcement, what we're now increasingly calling compliance. We have a draft policy that we want to bring through the planning committee process and then out to consultation with you later in this year, and I'd just be really encouraging people to respond to that and give us their views on things like response times, the priorities, and the approach that we're setting out to how we undertake the planning compliance activity. And against that, we also have a new planning compliance manager joining the service very early in January, who will be picking up and taking that work forward alongside a whole series of other changes to the compliance team. You will already have seen the effects of that in terms of the ability to report complaints online, and we'd really encourage, whether you are from the parish council or indeed councillors from the district or county or members of the community, please use that form, because it helps me and my team to understand, by looking at that inbox and the records that it creates, to understand what workloads we've got and how we're doing in terms of performance. So to me, those are the only things I wanted to highlight. There's a lot to get through on the agenda tonight, so I shan't take up any more time. And there's a period, I think, for questions at the end of this slot after Caroline and Jed's.
Yes, there is. Thank you very much for that, Stephen. I think we'll call on Caroline now. Thanks, Caroline.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen, hopefully. Hopefully you can see that now.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Just put it into slideshow mode. There we go.
That's it.
Right. Good evening, everyone. Yes, I'm Caroline Hunt. I'm Strategy and Economy Manager in the Shared Planning Service. I've just got a brief update on the new Greater Cambridge local plan that we're preparing, just as a reminder of where we are and an outline of where we're going next. So what have we done so far? We consulted on our first proposals for the local plan, our preferred options, at the end of last year, so a year ago now, and we published the representations to those proposals in the summer. And at the same time, we updated our local development scheme, which is effectively a timetable for preparing our local plans, and that updated the programme for delivering our local plan. I'll say a bit more about that timetable shortly. Just a reminder, really, that the approach to our new local plan is very much around not only the provision of jobs and homes and infrastructure to meet our development needs, but looking at those through the lens of really important issues around climate change, around biodiversity and green spaces, well-being and social inclusion, and making sure that we hopefully create great places through the work that the service does. So locally, I'm sure you'll be aware that one part of the strategy for the new plan is the proposal for an expansion of Cambourne. And just as a quick reminder, I'm not going to run through all those points, but they'll be available in the presentation afterwards for anyone who's interested in a bit more detail. But we identified Cambourne as a broad location for longer term strategic scale growth. And this was responding to the opportunity to be provided by the proposed East-West Rail and the fact that it was proposing a station at Cambourne. Given the uncertainty even a year ago over the location of a station, we at this stage have not identified any specific site. Therefore, it could be in any direction around Cambourne to be informed by further work. What we did say was that potentially around 2,000 homes could be delivered in the planned period, but there may be scope for additional development beyond that, and we weren't specific on the potential overall scale of that expansion. Obviously, we're mindful that perhaps there's even more uncertainty over East-West Rail at the moment. Stephen referred to some more recent engagement that's been ongoing. But obviously we're keeping a very close eye on how that proposal is going, and we'll be very much taking that into account as we work up the local plan. But the vision was very much about an expanded Cambourne to provide a sufficient critical mass in this location to take advantage of the high quality public transport that was coming to the area, not only East-West Rail, but also the Cambourne to Cambridge scheme, and just thinking about how we can ensure this becomes a town for the 21st century. You know, Cambourne was of its time, originated some years ago now. And this is about how we can maybe bring more employment to the area so more day-to-day needs can be met locally. And very much with an eye to really how we can move towards a net zero carbon strategy and place in Greater Cambridge. And clearly those proposals, if they remain part of the plan, would need to look at the relationship with the existing Cambourne and its proposed expansion to the west, and with Bourn Airfield to the east. The other local proposals, just to mention, were a housing development at Highfield Caldecott. This was a site that originally had planning permission, but it lapsed, but it is close to the stop on the Cambourne to Cambridge scheme, and we consider does have potential to still come forward for that housing development as part of the overall strategy. And also an area there just north of the old 428, between that and the new 428, for potential for a variety of different employment uses, close to that public transport connection, and also helping to provide more jobs close to Bourn Airfield. So what are the next steps for the local plan? We're now in the midst of a series of local planning advisory group meetings. They're member meetings of South Cambridgeshire, along with Cambridge City Council and the County Council, and to seek give an opportunity for members to discuss key feedback from the public consultation, and to seek members' views on the next step for each of the themes for the plan. And we've already had sessions on the vision and climate change, and also on the strategy and site. So they're available to view on the South Cams committee pages, which does include a summary of the comments received on the Cambourne expansion proposal in that consultation document last year. We're now moving towards formal committee meetings in January to consider those responses, and to consider and confirm the preferred strategy for the plan. And then that's a step towards a full draft local plan to be considered by members in the summer next year, and then be subject to public consultation in the autumn next year. And just very quickly, the remainder of the plan making process after that is to consider comments on that full draft local plan and consider any need for any changes to it. And then we then move on to a formal stage, a proposed submission stage. But we do need to wait the outcome of a process proposing the relocation of the Cambridge wastewater treatment plant in North East Cambridge, because the proposals for North East Cambridge, which are a core part of the local plan strategy, are predicated on the relocation of the water treatment plant taking place. So we need to see whether the DCO is approved before we can take the plan forward to that stage. We're envisaging that taking place in autumn next year, and we need to keep that under review in light of the progress of the DCO. And the local development scheme assumes submission to the Secretary of State for independent examination around summer, autumn 2025, again subject to the outcome and timing of the Cambridge wastewater treatment plant DCO. So we're moving forward with the local plan. Still a long way to go, but some key stages coming up as we move into next year. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Caroline. And let's move on now to Joe Baker from the Greater Cambridge Partnership, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can see my screen.
Yes.
Is that coming through? So I'll
yes,
give
it's
you
coming through. Thanks.
Very quick run through where GCP projects are at. First one to mention, obviously for the A428 corridor, is the Cambourne to Cambridge scheme. I think most participants on the call will be familiar with the scheme, so I'm not going to go through the detail of it, which has been presented many times previously, but really just give you a very quick update as to where we are at the moment. So the September meetings of the GCP Joint Assembly and Executive Board agreed that they were supportive of a Transport Works Act order application to be made to the DFT. The final stage before doing that is to seek approval from a full meeting of Cambridgeshire County Council, and we're anticipating that in first quarter of 2023, subject to agenda timings. Once an application goes into DFT, it is likely that that would trigger a public inquiry, which we'd anticipate for late 2023. So, as we've said previously, if the scheme gets through those various different stages and is approved by the Secretary of State, we would be looking at delivery from 2024 to 2026. So that's a quick update on Cambourne to Cambridge. The next thing, which hasn't been really presented to the same degree to this forum, which I think is important for people to be aware of, is what is being termed making connections. They used to be referred to as city access. And just to give you a very quick summary of where it's at, it was looking at raising revenues from charging for access into the city centre to raise funds to invest back into public transport and other forms of sustainable transport, particularly topical given the reductions in the stagecoach network recently, which the combined authority have temporarily been able to re-procure, but without a sort of sustainable funding stream to do that. There's a lot of detail out there, and I will give you the consultation web address at the end. It explains what's proposed. The zone is effectively similar to the built-up area of Cambridge, but as I say, you can see details of it through the different consultations, and the proposals are sort of phased in delivery of the zone, but the aim would be looking at a charge of £5 for the majority of vehicles, with a range of exemptions from 7 in the morning to 7 at night, and that's very much the proposal that's being subject to consultation at the moment. The aim is to produce around £50 million a year of revenue to invest in transport. And say, particularly in the early years, it will be about public transport investment. Once the scheme's up and running and the initial costs are offset, then there should be a surplus that could be invested into other forms like further greenways. So quick summary of the scheme, as I say, the charging zone, you can see here, broadly speaking, aligns to the built-up area, range of complex reasons why it varies in places. Park and ride sites all outside the zone. That again has been a little bit of a challenge, but it's important that park and ride is not priced, and that, you know, it's about encouraging people to use more park and ride. And there are a few key statistics on the right-hand side around the targets, and the way it's been designed has been very much around both reducing car trips in the city and raising enough revenue to enable us to maintain a much better public transport system. So the aim is to get sort of 6 buses now, a lot of core routes, and at least hourly services to most of the villages. So in many cases, a significant increase. I'll just give you the web address for the consultation at the end. The only other thing just to update, which again is relevant to this corridor, is what we're doing on active travel. Again, I think that's been discussed at this forum previously, so I won't dwell on it, other than work continues both on the NMU route for C2C, but also the Cambourne Greenway. And then just to finish, this is the address for the consultation for making connections. You can find it through our website as usual. There are a wide range of events that are being planned and undertaken over the next month or so, both face-to-face events and online events. So if people are interested, I know we were actually in Cambourne about a week ago, so that's been and gone, but I know I'm at least 2 more face-to-face events, and I think there are others. So there's plenty of opportunity for people to engage. Obviously, it's an important issue. Lots of people have got some strong feelings, and you'll have seen some of that on the media, but all I can say is to encourage people to participate as we proceed. So that's just a whistle-stop tour of where GCP is at the moment. I'm aware that certainly Bourn Parish Council have got some questions to put to us, which we'll happily pick up shortly.
Thank you very much, Joe, for that, yes, whistle-stop tour through the transport issues that are affecting, our corridor as well as generally. Just a quick one before we go to the questions, which is what's showing up on the screen now. Can you just explain a bit more the timing and what's proposed before the sustainable travel zone comes in?
So the key thing is that we would be looking to get public transport in place straight away. I mean, effectively, I think the loss of the stagecoach services has forced us to think about that more quickly than we're anticipating. but the aim would be over the next sort of 2 years or so to start ramping up the public transport services. That will be, you can't do it overnight. You need to get the buses, you need to train the drivers. And again, there's been a lot of debate about that in recent weeks as well, I'm aware. But the aim is to start getting that in place over the next couple of years, and also then starting getting the scheme itself designed and delivered in order that we can then move forward with the actual rollout with an aim of around 27 to start the sort of full imposition of the prices for everybody. So that's the timescale at the moment. As I say, we are very much in the first consultation on really the details of this. So I would anticipate there'll be further discussion and debate before we get there. But that's where we're at the moment.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Now we will, we've come to the question and answer session. And what we're going to do is start with some of the questions that we've had before, mainly from Des O'Brien, who's the chair of Bourn Parish Council. And I think these are largely actually for you, Joe, but obviously we'll be taking further questions anyway. As shown on our screens, the first one is, how will the C2C integrate with East West Rail?
So I mean, that's been raised quite a few times in debate on a number of occasions. Effectively, what we've said is, as and when we have clarity on East West Rail, and as people will be aware, the discussion has been whether there be a station to the north of Cambourne or to the south of Cambourne. That's not certain. Indeed, it's not, as you can see from the plan on left, completely clear that what would happen is very much they've got a number of potential routes. They're awaiting the outcome, as Stephen said, of the latest funding round. What we've said is ultimately, once there's clarity on that, C2C would eventually terminate at the station that is selected. But for the time being, our focus is on getting services as far as Cambourne. So that's at the outer end. There is an issue that the northern line would pass across the northeast edge of the Bourn Airfield development. And that may come back as an issue later on in this discussion. Again, I think by the time any East West Rail scheme came along, C2C would hopefully be developed and up and running. And so, as with any other infrastructure, such as the A428, which is nearby, the promoters of East West Rail would need to find a solution that got over both A428 and C2C, and that would be an engineering solution as you'd get with any other scheme. So that's probably about as much as I can say. I mean, we are, as you know, waiting the outcome of a consultation that was undertaken probably the best part of 2 years ago now. So I think until we find out
what the
government is, but it was early on, wasn't it? So it's probably 18 months, 20 months at least. So basically, as when we get clarity from government, I think we'll be keen. We keep talking to East West Rail, but I think they're also awaiting guidance from government in the same way as we are. So I don't think they're in any different place to we are in terms of knowledge on that.
Thank you for that.
Could I just ask a very quick follow-up question, just Joe, in relation to sort of flexibility? Then you're implying then that if C2C gets built out and then the station is built sometime later, you would still propose to modify it in order to pick up the station in Cambourne, wherever it eventually was?
I think I would say the scheme would be modified. GCP, as you know, is a time-limited organisation. East West Rail, we don't know what their scheduled delivery time is. It could be some time, but there's nothing with the way we're designing C2C. We're keeping it fairly agnostic on its approach into Cambourne, so that in due course C2C could be extended, whether we're extending it or whether somebody else has to come along and do it in due course. If GCP is no longer there, no longer has funding, that that depends on timing really. It will be a number of years before East West Rail is in place, but as I say, it's kind of hard to give you much certainty until we know for certain what the future is for East West Rail. But as I say, what we've talked about, and I've had discussions as well with Cambourne Town Council, the way I'd see it, that the likely outcome would be you'd almost have like a loop at the Cambourne end, that vehicles would go to the town centre and the station and then back, or the other way around, because actually connectivity, the station is not going to be close to the town centre wherever it is. So you'd also want to be ensuring regular connectivity between the two to make it useful for Cambourne residents as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was the question, the main question on this section, wasn't it, Des, for you?
And there were a couple of other questions just around some specifics around. I mean, Joe, I don't know how much more has been done around trying to give people an image of what the C2C will look like in terms of the running stock, the stops, how you buy tickets. I mean, I know this is early stages, but it would be nice to get some sort of, because it's high quality public transport. I put in an example of the TransLink glider in Belfast, which is something that I had in mind when I was thinking that this is what you're likely to do. But am I way off track, or is this something akin to what you're thinking of?
So taking these three examples, the photo on the left, in terms of the vehicles, hybrid/electric, yes, definitely modern high capacity buses. We won't be looking at articulated buses. I think getting an articulated bus through central Cambridge would be incredibly difficult. They've been controversial, to say the least, when they've been introduced elsewhere, and interaction with cyclists has generally been a major issue, which clearly for Cambridge of almost any city in the country, that would be a concern. But yeah, that sort of thing, if you actually look at some of the media, London are just introducing some more vehicles that look of a similar ilk, but are single unit body, and that sort of image of bus is exactly what we're looking for. We want something that looks like a tram, feels a bit like a tram. It will be a bus that'll be running on rubber tires. So that's there. Bus stop and route infrastructure, yes, clearly priority to have high quality infrastructure, real-time information, etc. Ticketing is an interesting one. Ticketing will be something to be delivered across the county. It won't be a C2C specific thing. Ticketing, we want ticketing to be more integrated. We certainly want it better. Will it be ticket based? Frankly, in 4 years' time, will depend on what the strategy is. As you know, the trend in a number of cities, particularly in London, but also elsewhere in the UK, is actually contactless, card-based and phone-based. And the ticket and the ticket machine is becoming rapidly redundant. So I wouldn't want to say precisely what, but it won't be an old school thing where you get on them, the driver sort of winds his machine and prints you a little ticket out. It will clearly be whatever the latest approach we're using for integrated ticketing across the county may be. That largely sits with the combined authority in terms of how it will be delivered.
Yeah, and then, I mean, I know we're short of time, Toomey, so I mean, I'll wrap the last question really revolves around what happened with Stagecoach. So there would be a concern, I think, locally, where people are thinking about who will run the buses, because of course we've had the 18 and the City 4 temporarily under threat, and people are thinking, well, who's going to run the buses? Is it going to be run by another like the Stagecoach? Could they withdraw services? Could services ever get compromised? People, I think, are really concerned about because it's happened with the City 4 and the 18. We were, as I say, under threat of having all our bus services removed. It made us think quite hard about who runs a bus service, a big bus service like the Cambourne to Cambridge.
So the buses will be run by a private operator, which may or may not be Stagecoach. Whether it's an operator that operates an area-wide franchise, you'll be aware that the mayor has the powers to set up a franchise more like you get in London that operates across the network. That's worked well in London, and so it may well be that those are powers that in due course the mayor will be taking up. It's certainly something that the combined authority has been looking at carefully, but there is some work to do before committing to that. The key thing being, if you have a franchise, that the operator is contracted to provide the services. And what we've seen recently has been a combination of a number of external factors, not least the aftermath of COVID, which has led to a loss of services. We will be looking to have an arrangement in place, and to some degree this also ties in with making connections as well, if that proceeds, because that then provides revenue that could be used to procure services. But again, it's also important that one of the reasons, as we've seen with the existing busway, is that by providing operators with an efficient service, they're more likely to maintain it, and the services that struggle are the more rural ones where they're seen as perhaps less attractive, less easy to operate. So it is clearly an important issue, and it's one we'll look at. But as I say, we'll be looking at how best to procure and ensure services over the next year or so. But it does depend partly how the combined authority moves forward on the wider franchising agenda. that in some ways it gives you an idea if we can get to that point.
Yeah, thanks for that, Joe. Thanks, Des. Definitely we need to watch this space as to what the combined authority does in the next few months to ensure that 18 and City 4 carry on running. There is a question from Gerhard Smith in the question and answer chat, which is saying, is it not counterintuitive to close 2 bus routes into Bourn? I think, Gerhard, can you explain what you mean? Because I think potentially Joe's last answer might have answered your question. Are you there?
He may not be his speech enabled.
Okay.
This may refer to the stagecoach changes.
I think that's what I'm thinking. Your answer has addressed that, that one.
In which case, as I said, that's really a product of a number of external factors. And
okay,
I think Stagecoach have withdrawn a number of services up and down the country as a result of loss of post-COVID funding. So,
but at least thankfully we have City 4 and 18 back for the next 6 months. And we watch this space. Thanks very much for that. Anyone else has any questions on Stephen Kelly's update or Caroline Hunt's update?
To me, just one quick question, and it relates to the uncertainty around the numbers of houses that may be delivered as an extension to Cambourne. And I wondered how much of an impact a decision not to go ahead with East West Rail would have on those numbers, bearing in mind that the consultation, or you're going to committee, or it's going to the sort of serious stage of the consultation next year in 2023. Where members are going to be briefed and everything else, and yet there's still complete uncertainty around the delivery of East West Rail, and as a consequence of that, what happens with 2,000 plus houses in Cambourne?
I think I will call Stephen Kelly to answer that question. Thank you.
Good. It's a great question, Des, and we haven't as yet resolved a final position on it. Obviously, it will be interesting to see whether East West Rail is referenced in the autumn statement that's due shortly. Clearly, as part of the housing growth trajectory that we previously identified in the first proposals, there was a suggestion that it could contribute around 2,000 homes to the meeting the housing need. We are looking more widely as well at we'll have to look more widely at that depending upon what happens from the autumn statement, what certainty we can get from East West Rail, but the delay in that project is unhelpful. We will be exploring whether or not C2C makes a difference in terms of provides effectively the capacity as part of the transport work for that potential provision, but associated with that, we'll be exploring actually what and whether Cambourne and the appropriate site it should come forward in the absence of East West Rail over the next few weeks. As I said, we're waiting to see whether the project itself is going to happen, or we can establish a degree of certainty about the project itself happening. Our first proposal suggested we would seek to take advantage of it. If we can't get certainty as the plan progresses, although the report that we're preparing for the January, as Caroline highlighted, is seeking to confirm an approach going forwards, effectively the formal iteration of the next version of the plan is not until the summer, by which time we recognise we do need to be pretty clear on that particular point. And if there is to be land at Cambourne, we need to identify where it is and what overarching scale it is, not just the contribution that it makes. So it's not yet resolved would be my comment to you.
So just to clarify then, you would, in order to get to that next stage, you would have to identify a site around Cambourne where 2,000 houses could potentially be built, rather than just have this vague notion that somewhere east, west, north, or whatever we may build 2,000. I'm trying to correlate it to the sort of search for sites and the site specific requirements that the plan needs.
Sure, it's not strictly required for Regulation 18, but we're for the next iteration of the plan in the summer next year. Although we're very conscious that the continued uncertainty about it is something that we want to kind of close down and be definitive on. We're obviously also looking at in the round at the responses that we've received from everybody, but we ask, it would be a little unusual in some respects if East West Rail were coming not to make any provision. The difficulty that we're facing at the moment is that we're not the decision makers on East West Rail, and we can't confirm or deny in some respects the future proposition in terms of whether it comes to the north or south. But we will be looking to try and provide as much clarity as we can about what our response is to that. As I said, in pure terms, that may well include also exploring from our transport modelling whether or not, if there is a delay in East West Rail, the plan could still make provision for growth at Cambourne on the premise of C2C being able to absorb the additional public transport requirements. But we haven't got any final conclusions on that yet either.
Yeah, certainly C2C carrying a lot of weight on its shoulders.
I'm going to have to move us on very quickly.
Yeah.
I can see that. Oh, okay, it's gone. I thought I saw a hand up, but I think that this brings us to the end of the general update section. As I said earlier on, now we will move on to the Cambourne forum section, please. And this is where I call upon the developer team to tell us about their update on Cambourne West. So Andrew Wright, Susie Hatters, yes?
Sorry to interrupt. I just noticed we had Joe had his hand up. I don't know if you missed that, or it might be a matter of timing and we just need to move on. But.
Yes, I thought I saw it earlier on and then it seemed to disappear, which is why I carried on. I'm sorry, Joe, can you?
I didn't have my hand up. I don't think so.
Oh no, Joe O'Dwyer.
Joe O'Dwyer. Sorry, not Joe Baker, Joe O'Dwyer.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you, Toomey. It was just a very quick question to Stephen Kelly.
Okay.
If East West Rail doesn't go ahead, isn't it a bit risky predicating the building of a couple of thousand houses on the back of the C2C bus, given the recent predicament with the withdrawal of bus services? It may be up and running for a period of time, but if it's built on the premise that that's going to fulfill the transport needs, and that in any way is withdrawn or curtailed or inhibited, wouldn't that leave it a bit of an oasis?
Thanks, Joe. I mean,
Over to you, Stephen.
I mean, I think what we'll tend to find, and with the other corridors, is that whilst the withdrawal of bus services from some routes, as Joe Baker has highlighted, it has really understandably caused concern, and even routes into Cambourne and Bourn. I think the expectation is that if alternative public transport corridors are to provide a solution, then it will be on those corridors connecting large settlements to one another that they're most likely to be successful. And certainly the traffic on the guided busway at the moment tends to be more resilient, or use of the guided busway tends to be more resilient in terms of its ability to sustain services than some of the other routes. But you're right in a sense that part of the challenge coming back in the light of experience from people would be, well, it's not going to be, we can't be absolutely certain. of the intensity of bus usage and the capacity, therefore, of the facility to provide relief. But part of our spatial strategy overall was the concept of connecting places together through these high traffic, high intensity public transport corridors, and the challenge that we will face if we cannot rely upon those types of corridors based solely on concerns about franchising will be about the concentration that then arises around existing settlements and the intensification of those settlements necessary in order to be able to deliver low carbon sustainable growth. So we'd like to, there's clearly going to be an exploration through making connections of alternative funding options for sustainable bus routing that has yet to be decided. But there's a long way to go yet, Joe, as well, in terms of the strategy, as Caroline highlighted, in which some of these matters, including the combined authorities approach to franchising, will be tested further. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Now we need to move on and catch up some time, please. Developer team, Andrew Wright, Susie Hatters, and Stephanie Moffat, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and make up some time.
Okay.
I'll just share my screen. So really, our purpose for today is just to give a little update from the presentation we gave at the summer forum. This is just a quick reminder that everybody knows the site where Cambourne West is and the site that we're talking about, and what the scheme is delivering overall. This is the plan we talked about a lot in the summer, about the Section 106 deliverables, and we circulated this after the summer forum. Again, if anybody wants this, they can let me know, and I'm happy to share this. This gives approximate dates of the Section 106 and community facilities coming forward via occupation dates, and we've then rolled that into the years that we think it will be delivered in. And then the update really from last time, all that's really changed from the summer to now is more families have been moving in, which is great. We've now got 57 homes occupied on the site, and we'll expect another 40 homes to be occupied before the end of 2022. What that will also bring us is our first occupations up in the sheepfold character area, as we call it, which is up in this top corner. I hope you can see my mouse up here, around here. So then we'll have families living down in the Swansley character area, and then up here at Sheepfold as well. And that's the only update I have really since the summer, just more people moving in, and happy to take any questions in the relevant slot. Might be more useful Q&A rather than me talking on anymore to catch up some time.
Okay, thank you. It's interesting that you've got 57 already in. So you'll be just under the 100 by the end of this year.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that, Stephanie. Next is the update on the Cambourne Village College, and I've got Alan Fitz from the County Education.
Hello. Yes.
I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Oh, okay. Hang on. Oh. Sorry, I'm trying to. It says I can't be displayed, but shall I try and share my screen and then?
Okay, try that.
I'll try that.
Yep, something is happening.
Right, is that working? Yes.
We can see it in the file with your columns, but not in the slideshow mode.
Okay.
So technology doesn't work when you want it to, even though it worked beforehand.
It did work beforehand, didn't it?
I know. I mean, you can try going forward as it is, see what Did you click on the from beginning or
try
custom
again.
slideshow?
Yeah, that's the one I did from the beginning. Let's try again.
Maybe unshare the screen, start it off and then share again. Will that help?
Yeah. The other option, I guess, is for Louise to do it, but
Or try again and then so Louise has it up now. Thanks, Louise. And now I can see you as well, Alan.
okay.
Good. Okay, please go ahead.
Okay, yes. So, so my name's Alan Fitz. I'm the 0 to 19 Area Education Officer for Cambridge and South Cambs, and responsible for planning school places, both primary, secondary, early years, and post 16 as well. So yes, I've been asked to give an update on the Cambourne Village College situation. So I was just going to go through quickly the sort of background, then sort of basically how the school's developed, and then talk a little bit about the final scheme. So it's quite a short presentation. As you may know, originally there was a plan. The plan was for two small schools, two secondary schools, to serve both Cambourne West and Bourn Airfield. But I think about 2 or 3 years ago, we had a review and decided that, and discussions with the trust, we decided that expanding the existing school was the preferred option. There's been a sort of fall in the size of preschool and primary school year groups. So, for example, the reception intake into primary schools this September was only 205. So that's obviously quite lower than some of the older age groups that are in the school. So yeah, so the plan now is to go from to increase the capacity to 11 FE, and we think that should be sufficient to accommodate both Cambourne and Cambourne West, which Cambourne West we're expecting to be about 4 FE of children. So just to go through the development of the actual village college, the first phase, 5 FE, was completed in 2013, and then it was extended by another 2 FE. The last phase we completed was in 2019, and this was to add a bit of, it was meant, it's a sixth form accommodation that will be eventually used for the sixth form. But because we knew we had some bulge years coming through of around 270 pupils, so 9 FE, we're actually using those for the additional 11 to 16 pupils, and the sixth form hasn't opened yet. However, we have a further phase, which is just getting underway, and that extension is to go to 11 FE, which will include some additional accommodation for 11 to 16 pupils, and we'll also add to the sixth form to allow it to offer 350 places. So again, so the current scheme is, because of various delays, we're doing it in various phases. So block 1, which I think is about 4 general teaching classrooms, will open in September 23, so that's next September, hopefully ready for the intake that year, and then the rest of the blocks will be phased over the next year or so after that. So that was my short presentation. Thank you. Okay,
thanks very much for that, Alan. I think I do have a question, but we'll wait until the Q&A section. But we might have to bring your slide back up again. Thank you very much. Now we've got an update on the SCIP section, and who's going to do this? David, is that you?
Yes, that's me.
Okay, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, good evening all. So I'll give a brief presentation on our emerging proposal at the land north of Lower Cambourne, or south of the business park, as some might know it. So who are South Cambridgeshire Investment Partnership? It's the first time we've presented at this forum. Well, we're an equal partnership made up of South Cambridgeshire District Council and Hill Group. Hill Group are a local house builder, a five-star house builder, who are based in Cambridge and Cambridgeshire. And just a note here about the design and evolution of the project, how that partnership works. It's very much a joint partnership. So both members of the council, or officers from the council, sorry, and managers from Hill attend all the design team meetings. We set a brief together, and we've seen that through the evolution of the project. And we also have a senior design advisor, Teresa Borsuk from Paula Thomas Edwards, who comes with 35 years of experience in award-winning developments, and she's helping us to create a sustainable new neighbourhood here. So this is our master plan. Firstly, I just want to acknowledge a local concern around the proposed link to Cambourne West through the business park, where it's proposed for buses and cycles only. This links outside of SCIP's control. So this presentation will focus on the development plans itself and not on that aspect. But there's certainly things to talk around this plan. So this is a very significant site, and it's almost the final jigsaw piece that was allocated for residential development to tie in Cambourne West with the rest of Cambourne. And in that way, it needs to bridge quite urban buildings in the business park down to Lower Cambourne's much more sort of two and a half story scale. So for that reason, we have apartment buildings on the northwest and the northeast. They help step down the scale from what are roughly 5-story office buildings down to a residential scale. We then have quite a strong urban frontage along the business park. And this helps to give a really urban response, an important response to the business park, in retaining those mature trees that are along there, that beautiful tree-lined avenue that you see in front of the ponds. And then the scale reduces down to 2.5 stories, right down to some 2-story, quite rural-looking houses in the courtyards to the south. And we've also got 3 significant open spaces. We've also got a 4th quite small tree place over here, which welcomes the link through to the school. And these open spaces, I'll touch in more detail on later, but they're combined by a foraging route. This was quite a key idea from the beginning that we had, to have an edible, a route lined by edible planting right through from Lower Cambourne to Cambourne West. And that's also a cycle route, a shared cycle and pedestrian route. And we also have a dedicated cycle route that crosses east to west as an alternative to the bridle way on those muddy days, those muddy winter days getting to and from the school. We're also looking to convert the marketing suite to a cafe. We held a survey with the business park employees, and that signified certainly a desire to create that marketing suite into a cafe. I think about 80% of people wanted that. Other ideas were considered, and South Cams are looking at other ideas as well for the plot 4010, which is the commercial plot that remains with South Cams for the future. We've considered various things in the design. We obviously have the woodland around our site. So we've surveyed the individual stems along there and then calculated the future growth of those trees to make sure that our buildings are set far back and that we won't have any future impact on that growing woodland, as it's quite young at the moment and we want it to flourish in the future. And sustainability is something that's been the core of this scheme. So it will be gas-free with air source heat pumps in each of the homes. All the homes will have at least one active electric vehicle charging space, and the affordable homes will be built to either passive house or net zero carbon standards. We also have the high quality open spaces, and we've woven biodiversity into those spaces, into the foraging route, to make sure that this is giving something back, that it's enhancing biodiversity. I'll just walk through some of the open spaces, and then we've got quick view of some of the homes. So this is what we're calling the square. And we discussed this with many residents at the consultation. There was some concern around a previous reference to a market square. What we've designed out of feedback from that was a flexible space that provides both soft landscaping, trees. We're looking to incorporate, obviously this is an emerging plan, so incorporating new trees here, some quite large mature species, as well as flexible workspaces where you could sit outside, maybe do a bit of work, space for the coffee vans and barbers vans to pull up, as well as seating and a sort of hard landscape flexible area. And we think this flexible plaza space can be part of the rest of the business park in terms of providing that multifunctional use and potentially an event space. We have the central park in the middle, and this is the heart of the development. So we've got play equipment for children of all ages. We've got older children's play area here, younger children's here, and then a kickabout area, which is quite a flexible space, along with wildflower meadow, new tree planting, and the foraging route coming through there, as well as a small orchard here. And this foraging theme we've implemented around the development. So in the third open space, which is in the northeast of the site, we have an actual orchard, which will have a variety of fruit trees. We've also got raised beds where we can encourage community planting and community growing, as well as seating and an undulating landscape there. So we think these open spaces will be really welcoming to existing and new residents, and also to employees and users of the business park to help integrate those uses successfully. And this is just a view of what some of those homes could look like. So this is the main entrance. Obviously, these are very early images. They require some development, but we're looking at that strong business park frontage with 3-story homes, then stepping down to more rural homes with a mixture of new streets and different characters as you go across the development. And you can just see that east-west link with the cycle route through there.
Okay.
So that was the end of the presentation.
Wow, thank you very much for that. Thanks, David. It certainly looks quite interesting. I think now we can go on to the question and answer section of this part of the meeting. So thank you, Stephanie, David, and Ellen. Questions for you. I've got a couple at the minute. If anyone's got more questions, please put them in the Q&A chat section, please. The first one for you, I think this is for the school. So this will be for you, Alan. Was the fall in admission numbers predicted? If not, how will you be sure those numbers will continue to lower and not need new schools?
So yes, because we get information on preschool numbers from the sort of health authority data. Yes, those lower numbers were predicted. It's fair to, and it's worth saying that it's a typical pattern you get with new housing developments, that you do get a bulge in numbers going through, and then numbers tend to go like a sine wave, so you get a typical fall. So this is the usual, a sort of usual pattern you get from a new housing development, but we would expect the number of children to obviously increase once the Cambourne West development gets going.
Okay. Thanks for that. It's just one of the things I noticed was, I think it was your first or second slide, you had Bourn Airfield on there, and I wasn't sure how that related to the Cambourne school, because I think Bourn is going to have its own school anyway.
Yes. So Bourn will have, the plan is to have 2 primary schools and 1 secondary school. So yeah, we are treating Bourn Airfield as a sort of a more separate development.
Thank you. That's fine. I think, Louise, did you want to come in on the first question about the lowering of numbers? Louise, can you hear me? No?
I can hear you. Sorry, I'm not quite following the lowering of numbers.
Oh, okay. I thought I saw something that said you wanted to answer a question. Not to worry.
Okay.
Right. The next question again is from Kevin. And this is for David, I think, on the SCIP. For the new housing area, it's great to hear there's air source heat pumps will be included in homes. What about solar and or battery storage?
Thanks, that's a good question. We're still refining the provision there, I think, and working through with a sustainability consultant on what's needed. It partly depends on the target that we choose for the affordable rented homes, whether that's passive house or net zero carbon, but there certainly will be solar panels around the development. Battery storage is an interesting one. Some car chargers come with battery storage, so we'll continue looking into that and make sure that's noted within the application.
Right, okay. I think one of the things I wanted to actually ask was whether, I noticed you've got, play spaces for young children. One of the things that we tend to find is that there isn't space for the older kids. Is this something that is planned or are you looking at?
It's obviously a development of just 256 homes, so there's only so much we can do within the open space provision. But what we have allowed is the kickabout areas and the flexible spaces to try and allow that space for others to use and for gatherings, as well as thinking about those coming from the school, allowing seating for them to maybe gather together and have a chat after school on their way home. But no, we haven't incorporated older children's play such as skate ramps or anything.
Okay, and you mentioned turning the marketing suite into a cafe. Is this a marketing suite that exists now? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Okay. And I think one last question. This is on the school. Actually, before I go to that, something for you, David. Again, just looking at making a development more child-friendly, other than the play space. Is the whole development itself, young people friendly?
We certainly hope so, yes. Yeah, there's a lot of work has gone into the design around the hierarchy of movement and making sure that pedestrians feel free to use the spaces that they feel it's their priority, which goes right hand in hand with, I think, making it feel friendly and approachable to children. So they're not afraid of cars coming and afraid of staying on. It's much more of an open approach. We've got the open spaces sort of spilling over and closing off roads around the park. And that foraging route prioritised all the way through, as well as the play equipment and play along the way, which features around the foraging route, but also different parts of the site, just informal play equipment that kids can use as they're walking along. So yeah, hopefully they feel really at home there. It's been designed for them. Okay.
Well, hopefully you will involve some young people in that design eventually.
Yeah. Sorry, if I can just touch on that. We did have a youth engagement event at the primary school as well, and held a competition with different seating ideas, for example. So we're hoping to incorporate some of that into the public art for the project.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Tumi, you're mute at the moment.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened there. The question from Claire, can I have Stephen to answer that, please? What progress has been made in planning to improve access to Cambourne Village College and Hardwick and Cambourne Primary School?
Thanks, Tumi. We're aware of the concerns that exist, and Alan Fitz has highlighted the phasing for the delivery of Cambourne secondary school expansion and the college expansion. Unfortunately, the position we're in at the moment is that ahead of the expansion of the community college, the primary access for the secondary school will shift to the spine road, the main spine road through the site, the Cambourne West site, upon the ability to be able to ensure that we can secure safe access from the spine road there. Until that time, we're aware of the concerns around congestion and vehicle usage along the former sheepfold lane for both the primary school and the secondary school. We have been trying to provide further information on the transition, that journey. I know there's been suggestions about simply opening up the access way between Cambourne Business Park and the Cambourne West to all traffic movements. That won't fundamentally alter the problem of access, because the former sheepfold lane area street, which will ultimately serve primarily the primary school only, that stretch will still require, whether one goes through past the BMW garage and back around onto Sheepfold Lane or through the Cambourne Business Park, that form of access is not going to be changed. The scheme is approved, the Cambourne West scheme, and that stretch is approved. The road infrastructure is appropriate in the view of the County Council to meet that demand. But as Alan Fitz has highlighted, the expansion of Cambourne College, and indeed the plans for Cambourne College, and let me just see if I can find a way of sharing those plans, it has means that the access to the secondary school itself will shift. I'm just going to see if I can change the.
Whilst you're doing that, Stephen, just to say there's a sort of supplementary on that, saying that the spine road will not assist those who drive in from Lower, Greater and Upper Cambourne.
Well, the access strategy, obviously, for Cambourne West as a whole, is around access through through pedestrian and cycling movements. That's most certainly the way that the scheme has been designed to encourage more sustainable means of travel, and in fact, in many respects, to not make driving between parts of the same settlement the primary mode of travel. That's the objective of trying to create a more sustainable place. So there is safe and appropriate access between the school and Cambourne communities via road, but it isn't our objective to make that the fastest route possible, because we are trying to encourage a shift in more sustainable lifestyles and recognise the importance of cycle and pedestrian movements and make sure that those are safe and easy. The spine road itself, in due course, will provide a high standard road through the whole site, which will also obviously be the primary bus route as well. Okay, I'm having difficulty in putting the slide up with an image, so I might need to.
Maybe we send that later.
Yes, I can attach it to the presentation, and hopefully it will provide clarity. I'll probably annotate it. Right,
thank you. I'm sorry, Claire, we're probably gonna, if you want to email us, we can probably take some of these issues outside of this meeting. Understand your concern, but obviously, as Stephen has explained, there's a reason why the spine road was designed as it was. A comment from Kevin, having worked in most business parks, a cafe at the marketing suite will seem rather small when considering A10 Research Park or Science Park. David, do you want to comment on that? Is it going to be made bigger, or is that the size that's going to remain?
That's the size as it is at the moment, but for a cafe, I appreciate for a much larger business park, you might have a sort of Starbucks or Costa standalone. We're looking at a much smaller facility, still a good size for a cafe. It's about double the minimum size for a cafe from many more local operators. So we're currently, or Cambourne Business Park rather, are out for a tender process at the moment, just looking for who might be interested in that cafe, and so far there's quite a bit of interest. So we're hopeful that that will provide a real amenity in the business park that draws those walking their dogs and those using the business park, and together with new residents as well.
Okay, thanks. I would imagine there will be some interest in that, bearing in mind the potential that there is. And the last one, I think, for you, will there be a youth engagement event with young people, not children?
It's a good question. So I don't think we've obviously had the public consultation, and we had 2 events as well as a webinar. So we met some of local young people then. I had some good conversations. Through the public art programme, I think we'll also have further engagement there with young people, try and get them involved, as well as when construction starts, hopefully engaging both young and older kids in some of the construction activities, teaching them bits about it, and under the Considerate Contractors programme, just engaging different age groups of children in the construction activities.
Okay, thank you. Right, I think I've got a question for Stephanie regarding Cambourne West. Not sure if our NHS rep can potentially help out here, but I understand there's been some families who can't find somewhere to, or a doctor's surgery to register with. This is something you're aware of?
Yes, because we talked about it at the forum in the summer, didn't we?
Correct.
I think our slot was at the same time as the surgery representatives, and they guaranteed at that meeting that people buying houses at West Cambourne would be able to register at a practice, maybe not the closest, but at a practice.
A practice in the area.
Yeah, that's what they said at the last forum. I've not heard anything from new residents since. I had heard that up before that forum, but no residents have contacted us since that I'm aware of.
Okay. Well, I have seen a couple. I think it was on Cambourne forum.
Okay.
Are
they existing? Are they new residents? Do you know?
They're new residents.
And well, we discussed it at the last forum, didn't we? When we were given reassurances.
That's why I thought I'd bring it up, just to make you aware that there is potentially something there that you might want to see to.
I'll reach out to the ladies that gave the presentation to the forum last time. Okay,
that's good. Thank you. And I'll see if I can find the details of the ones that I saw.
Yeah, thank you. That'd be helpful.
I should have. Anyway.
That's okay. We can reach out to them after the meeting.
Yeah. Right. I noticed there are a couple of hands up. Would you like to speak, please?
Yeah, this is a question for David. Just in looking at his outline for the new development, it seems to me that the foraging area sort of looks as if it precludes a link between West Cambourne and the Cambourne Business Park by road, and I know that is outside his jurisdiction. But I just wanted to find out where we were, or where any of us are, in relation to securing a link between West Cambourne and that road. Is that just been parked completely now, or are we still looking to try and have a link between West Cambourne and the Business Park Road?
Should I answer that?
Please.
No, the expectation, Des, is that there is a bus and cycle and walking access between the business park and Cambourne West. It isn't expected that there will be a connection through there. It just will not be an all. It won't be for private vehicles other than buses. So it's intended to pursue the provision of restricted access through that for buses.
So Sheepfold Lane then remains the only private vehicle access to West Cambourne?
Yes.
From
the scheme design and the planning permission factored the 2 access ways, obviously from the north and the south, either end of the Spine Road, into Cambourne West for private vehicles, with obviously the cycle and NMU accesses that sit also within the planning parameters plans. I am sorry that I can't, for some reason, I don't appear to be able to share my screen showing that, but I will attach the parameter plan, which goes with the outline planning permission, to this meeting note, so that people can see that, see the provisions that exist.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Right. Unless I thought I saw Joe's hand up earlier on. Do you still have a question,
Yeah,
Joe?
I do, Tim. It's two things.
Okay.
One's a comment first, or an update rather, on the issue with new residents and GP facilities. At last evening's Cambourne Town Council, reported by the district councillors who have been taking this up, that the clinical commissioning group have informed full medical practice, Bourn doctors and PAPA doctors, and also the new residents, that they'll be allocated one of those 3 surgeries. So, you know, that's the current state of play as far as allocation of GP services for the new residents on West Cambourne. And the question was one for David, really. David, given that there was 200 respondents, you said 80% wanted a CAF for the old marketing suite, well, that's 160 people. Aren't the needs of the business park users given a lot more weight than the potential needs of the new residents of the 260 dwellings? Because as there is space for external coffee and sandwich vehicles to pull up, as you indicated, wouldn't that space be better served for the residents as a community facility, so they can organise themselves and have various functions and do's, and a facility for themselves to develop themselves as a sense of place and make that small, creatively isolated community sustainable? It seems like research was a foregone conclusion, because it was even before it was out, it was going to turn into a coffee bar. So I wonder what your comments on that are, David.
Can I come in here? Can you make that quick, please, so that because we're now running behind.
Yes, of course. Yeah, and apologies, Joe, that I haven't got you the consultation report yet. So we asked an open question as to what residents wanted. Out of the 200 respondents, that was all local residents. So it wasn't anyone, no one registered as employees of the business park for that survey. And there was the majority of them wanted that as a cafe. And we then surveyed business park residents separately. And I think the 80% was of the business park residents, but I'll share those results with you, Joe.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for the panelists for this session. Now we move on very swiftly to the third and final part of this evening, which is on Bourn Airfield. And pleased to call on, is it Chris? Are you going to give us the presentation?
I am with
quarter.
I am to me with Harry, who is going to start the presentation and put it up, and this will be a joint effort between the two of us, which hopefully will impress everybody. Thank you very much. Harry.
Give me just a second. Right. Where are we? Let me know when you can see that.
That's perfect, thanks.
Yeah, so yeah, Chris and I, probably just worth introducing ourselves, were the development managers at Bourn Quarter in the centre of Bourn Airfield. We'll give you a bit of an update on phase 1, sort of from start to almost finish now. Have a look at phase 2 proposals as well, and then obviously any questions after that. Right, Chris, over to you.
Okay, so as many of you are aware, the original Bourn site was purchased in 2018. The picture on the left there shows what it was, which was effectively 25 acres of concrete and sound attenuation bund on the east side of Bourn Airfield. It was previously operated by Gestamp as a metal pressing facility. This was a 24-hour operation. It produced a lot of noise and a lot of disturbance to the local villagers, particularly Highfield, Caldecott, who were, some residents were very close. Some attempts were made to lessen that sound by the installation of a bund, but I'm sure you're all very familiar with the history. The pension fund clients of Savills Investment Management, originally with our input, we're going to develop the site in 3 distinct phases for a business park. It started off as an industrial estate. It very quickly developed into a business park. Those 3 phases have now reduced to 2 phases, simply because of the demand we've had locally and the various construction issues that we've come across on the site. It's better to do it in 2 phases for economic reasons and for all sorts of other reasons relating to demand. The original plan back in 2018 was to develop this, and the development would flow in parallel with the Bourn Airfield residential scheme that was being proposed by Countryside. But of course, that, due to various delays, has not been the case, and we now find ourselves considerably ahead of any development on the adjacent airfield. The original hybrid application was for phase 1 and 2. And as I say, the economies of scale have meant that we are now only doing 2 phases rather than 3. And we'll come on to the current application shortly. If we go to the next slide, please, Harry. So these pictures show, in fact, the picture on the left shows a time-lapse picture of phase 1 going up. So whilst you're busy watching that, you can listen to the background noise, which will be me. So the scheme was design-led with a low density layout with the emphasis on landscaping. That is going to carry throughout the whole scheme. The central landscaping strip, which you can see running down as a street through phase 1, will provide a north-south cycleway and footpath, providing links to hopefully the bus route from residences to the south of this development as and when they are built. It will also provide an area for employees of the various companies on there to mingle. They can spend their time there. It provides a sense of location, a sense of well-being, a sense of space. There's a swale running down the middle, so that has water in it at times. And we've also located, as you can see, the parking to the north and the south of the scheme. So we've taken the car parking away from the units. There are loading yards, but the majority of the car parking is to the north and the south, and that is allocated spaces. So in the future, actually, we can regulate how many cars are allocated within each unit, depending on the demand that they have. Phase 1 started in May 2021, really construction, doing the whole enabling works and the construction. They also prepared part of the phase 2 site as well. Practical completion was 12 months later, so earlier this year, and the snagging has just about been completed now. The scheme provides a total of 156,000 square feet in 15 units. Those units range from 1,750 square feet. We have a line of 6 small units, and we are still thanking Tumi for her input in the pre-app meetings, which caused us to build those, up to 56,000 square feet in Unit 3, which has now become the headquarters of Cambridge Design Partnership, a local company. Harry will fill you in on more of that, but that is where we are. Harry, over to you.
Yep. Great. So I will quickly skim over phase 1 and sort of who we've got on site now. We're up out of the ground and mostly done. So the scheme, it's let really well. We're about 85% let at at this time, and hopefully the last few units will get over the line in the coming months. Hopefully some before Christmas, possibly some after as well. Chris obviously touched on Cambridge Design Partnership, who are our major tenants. They have 2 units on the estate, and they are probably quite a good example of the types of occupier we've now got. I think Chris also briefly mentioned that this was at one stage a sort of an industrial park, and it's very much moved away from that into a what people like to call a sort of mid-tech business park, and the interest we're getting reflects that. So we've got 1 unit let to a vertical farming company. We have a high-end office furniture supplier. We have companies involved in all sorts of research and design, from battery technology to irrigation systems. So it's been one of the most fascinating parts of the whole project is engaging with local businesses, a lot of which have come out of the university, come out of the science parks and the research parks, and are now upscaling and moving to sort of more advanced research and design phases of their business. Small note on transport and location. We generally attracting the right sorts of people, and there hasn't been too much negative comments about those who are coming away from very well connected central locations to a location further out. But there are some smaller occupiers who do still comment on the lack of public transport links, but that is all something that hopefully will improve in the future. I think that's most of what we've got on phase 1. I will skip forward onto phase 2 now. So we submitted the detailed application for the remainder of the site. As Chris mentioned, that is now phase 2 and what was phase 3 combined. Submitted that back in July, and just going through some of the sort of key design aspects of this. It's very much continuation of the scheme. It will read as one and will be continuing the same finishes, look, purpose and feel of what's already there. It works well, so if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So we have 6 units left on phase 2. They range from 13,000 to 26,000 square feet, mostly reflective of the sort of demand we're getting out of phase 1, and trying to tailor the units as much as we can to the occupiers and the demand that we're seeing. We're putting in a slightly higher content of office space. This is, again, from feedback we've had of companies who are using them more as office and research and design space than perhaps a typical warehousing unit. The spec remains very high with high specification offices, all the usual bits and pieces you'd expect to see on a warehouse of this size. And our big focus, something that's sort of grown with the project, is the focus to be in net zero carbon development. So I'm sure that's a word everyone's quite familiar with and has been thrown around a bit, but we are aiming not only to be net zero carbon in construction, so offsetting and reducing our emissions during the build as much as possible, but we are also trying to be, and it will be one of the first in the UK if we pull it off, a net zero carbon in operation, which for an industrial estate is quite challenging. I won't go into the detail too much, but we are, well, you'll have noticed, perhaps you won't have, if you'd flown over phase 1, you'll have noticed a significantly higher amount of PV panels on the roof than we originally had planning for. And we're going to follow that same strategy on phase 2. So rather than spec all the solar panels straight away. What we try and do is wait to see who occupies the units and tailor the energy solutions of the unit to the end user. It's inefficient with an industrial unit, which could be anything from someone just racking and storage to high-tech R&D outfit to try and tailor the energy usage of a unit to an occupier. But something we're working on. We're also exploring glulam timber frame construction, which is very new to us. It is hopefully something we can bring to reality, but again, not much of it in the UK yet. Finally, I will touch briefly on landscaping. As Chris mentioned, we are continuing our central swale landscaping strip up and down north to south, which will provide connectivity through to the wider Airfield development. We've enhanced the landscaping in the car parks. We've put further planting in, created new green verges along some of the areas here, and crucially we've also added in a sort of east-west link, which wasn't in our original proposals, and that will hopefully promote further connectivity through the airfield. There is a footpath due to go in up here, I believe, at some stage in the future, and we've also added a biodiversity section down at the bottom, which will be planting out as part of phase 2 and 3. I think that's a snapshot on phase 2 and 3, but I'll move swiftly on. I think I've covered.
We are running behind now, so.
Yeah, I think I've covered most of it, but you know where we are roughly on the progress of the phase 2 application, and we would be delighted to answer any questions, and there's contact details if you need them.
Okay. No, that's great. Thank you. There is a question on the R&D park. Great news on the new companies. Why did they choose your park?
I think, simply put, a lack of space in the area for this sort of product. The Cambridge market's generally quite well catered for in fitted lab space, research space, which tends to be A, more expensive, and B, smaller in scale for a lot of companies. And we offer a space that can be tailored pretty much to whatever companies want to do inside it. And that, combined with a sort of high quality product, has been a USP for us.
If I could just cut in there as well, I think Cambridge Design Partnership, which have taken units 2 and 3, which total about 85,000 square feet, are a local company started and based in Toft. And they have expanded over the years into adjacent buildings, other buildings in the locality, and part of their reason for taking this new building is to get everybody back under the same roof. They have a very collaborative business and the way they develop products for other companies. And speaking to Mike Beedman and Mike Kane, the founders, they want everybody in the same building. So what they've done here is to choose a place where a lot of their employees now live around the area. There is some frustration that they can't already buy houses on Bourn Airfield and walk to work. Ditto some frustration about the bus services, but these are highly educated Cambridge or university graduates who have chosen to live in this area and work for Cambridge Design Partnership, which is now an employee-owned company. So that was a big driver for certainly CDP for being in the locality.
Yeah, no, that's great. No, that's good to hear. I mean, from what I have seen, you seem to be, doing a lot of work, especially towards being net zero carbon. That's very, very well done. Also, the smaller units. I know you said the interest initially was slow, but glad to see that is now is getting much better.
We were on site earlier today, Tumi. You'll be pleased to know that we had a viewing from a company that might want 2 of them today. So
Okay.
smaller businesses take time to make their mind up. They're far more cost sensitive, and the smaller units always follow on. And of course, we might be a bit choosy because we want businesses that will expand from those units into perhaps larger units. We want someone who's going to grow.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair enough. No, thank you very much for that. It's good to have you on the forum and with the update that you've given us. There's no further questions that I can see or anyone with their hands up. No doubt there will be further questions that might come later on. So thank you, Chris, and thank you, Harry.
Thanks,
that.
everybody.
I think now we can move to the last part of the of this evening, which is the presentation from Bourn Parish Council. Des, yeah, up again.
Yes, thank you, everybody. I'm not sure whether Louise has got my slides, and this is a very short presentation. I'll quickly say to everybody, or do I need to share my screen?
Have them. I can do them.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Louise. So very quickly, and this is just an appeal from Bourn Parish Council to look at the public spaces that will eventually be on Bourn Airfield. Now, I know this seems very early, but I just thought I'd discuss it briefly. I know that Cambourne had an issue with the Market Square and ownership of public space, and it's an appeal for the developers of Bourn Airfield that they attempt to try and make a sense of centre and space that is publicly shared in the Bourn Airfield site. As just an example, in the pictures you see, that's the Cambourne Market Square as you see it. It's owned, I believe, by Morrison's, and it's a fairly bleak place. Compare that to Cambourne Market Square, which is a small town of similar size that shares its name in Cornwall, a very, very different place. And I would like to think that Bourn Airfield would also take account of that and make sure that public spaces are owned and managed publicly if they possibly can. Thanks, Louise. Next slide, if that's okay.
Yeah.
That's the same to be said. I think there was some discussion on this in the piece around the development south of the South Cambridge District Council offices, and that's public spaces, public sculpture, and street names, and even the name of the settlement itself, Bourn Airfield. It's still being referred to as Bourn Airfield. The Parish Council here in Bourn, I'm sure Caldecott and Cambourne would very much like to be involved in the process of establishing what the public spaces will look like, whether or not there'll be public art. I'd like to think there would be, taking account of the airfield heritage and the position of community facilities and public spaces. So really, it's just to try and make sure that people are aware early on that people locally are engaged with these issues and they do want these things to be taken into consideration. Thanks, Louise. And then finally, this is a topic that I know Louise and I discussed briefly, and I just wanted to make this a more public discussion around what's going to happen with a governance review on Bourn Airfield. Caldecott Parish Council, Bourn Parish Council, and Cambourne Town Council will all have a part to play, but I'd like the terms of reference around a community governance review to be aired and public as much as it possibly can be. And so this is an appeal to the planners and to the developers and to anybody else involved that we would like to be involved in that as closely as possible. Obviously, we will be once we get started, but it'd be nice to make public the sorts of terms of reference that will come into consideration and to have people who are living locally properly engaged with a governance review. That's all I've got to say. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that. I think the governance review issue is something that will come further down the line, actually. If you look at the examples of, I think it was Cambourne and even Northstowe, these were done after they were built up to a certain level and had a number of people living in it. So I guess Louise can probably hopefully add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy to take questions now, but just also to say I'm really happy to come and speak to parish councils or groups along the way. It's not the forum or nothing. We're really happy to talk about this.
We'll definitely not be hiding anything. It'll be open. That's for sure. So thanks for that, Des. Stephen, would you like to answer the questions on the open realm or the public realm issues that were raised, please? I'll come to you later, Chris. I can see your hand.
Thanks, Tumi. Yes, and Des, I think etched on everyone's consciousness is the Market Square in Cambourne, and unfortunately Morrison's kind of dogma about keeping that space clear. The Bourn Airfield planning application has provisions for both the requirement for a scheme for the management of the open spaces to be submitted to the council, and that includes a range of options that we would expect to see through that. We can't predetermine an option from a planning authority perspective in terms of what's acceptable. Certainly our bitter experience on planning appeals has made clear that it's a requirement for an appropriate scheme, but the council will be the judge of that when it's submitted in due course. And certainly from a kind of placemaking context, we're acutely conscious of the need for participation of the local community in that journey. And likewise, in terms of the public art and the representation history of the location, there's again a requirement in the planning permission that matters addressed. So I think we're very conscious of the concerns that exist about ensuring it's an appropriate place, and through the planning agreement and through the planning conditions, the expectation is that there is a framework in place to allow for that to be resolved in a more satisfactory manner. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Stephen. Chris Mills, you have your hand up.
I do, Tumi, thank you. Just to address Des's point, we have already engaged with an Airfield Memorial Trust, and will be including a memorial to the airfield, which is a stone monolith in the landscaping for phase 2, as part of that central landscaping strip. And we also have proposals for public art at some point in the landscaping. So whilst we're not the town square, Des, we're doing a bit of lifting for you.
That's very nice to hear. Thank you, Chris. And hopefully it'll set a good example for countryside as well. I'm sure they're aware of it too.
Art is in the quality of the art's in the eye of the beholder. So, but we'll try and do as best we can.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for that, Chris. Does anyone have any questions? We've got a few minutes. If there's anyone with any further questions on the issues that we have discussed this evening. I'm not sure if there's one that I think is still potentially outstanding. On the David Parker, are you still on the call potentially?
Yeah, hi, it's David.
Beg your pardon, David Park.
Yeah,
beg your pardon.
Yes, yeah, happy to. So there was a question in regards to health registration for general medical services. So the position we have at the moment with Sackville House, which is in Cambourne, which is the GP surgery, and Sackville House obviously has the library and the children's centre there. If residents moving into Luna Park, West Cambourne, do want to register at Sackville House, and that would probably be their priority given the proximity to where they live, then they can apply to the practice directly. Unfortunately, the practice boundary does not cater for the new development, and in fact we have no practice catering for that particular geographical patch, and it's in what we call no man's land. However, as commissioners, we can override a practice declining a patient due to that reason, not being in the professional, the registration boundary, and ask them to register that patient if that's their patient's choice. So I think we've certainly had many or several patients that we have registered at Sackville House, Monkfield Medical Practice, and also some patients have chosen to go to the Papworth Everard surgery as well, further north to where they live. I think in the longer run, we are in the process of thinking about probably procuring a branch site in the building at Sackville House, and it will probably be run by a local GP contractor, probably not Sackville House, but another provider, providing that GMS, general medical services, to those patients living in Luna Park. If there's any problems with patients or residents experiencing a decline in registration at Sackville House, then our patient experience team is going to broker that deal with the practice and the patient. So I hope that can be resolved, and we can give details of the patient experience team email address if that's helpful.
That would certainly be very helpful, please, and make that available to the, to us at the council, as well as the town council, so that they can direct people as and when they are aware of the issues.
So I think I'll email Louise the email address for our patient experience
That's
team.
Fine.
And they're well versed on the process of getting those patients registered at Sackville House.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much for your answers. Joe, I'm not sure if you're still here, Joe Dwyer. Hopefully that helps too.
I am, Toomey, yes. I am, yeah.
Okay.
As I say, yeah, it's similar, not dissimilar to what we was told, except it included Bourn practice.
Okay.
But yeah, thank you. It's good to know. Thanks.
Okay, great. Right, is there any further questions from anyone that you want to raise before we end? Or any questions we've not answered? No, I see no hands and I see no comments. So at this juncture, I will say thank you to everyone for attending the forum this evening. And thank you especially to our presenters and panelists for your time. The forum dates for next year will soon be uploaded to the forum website. And you can also sign up to the forum mailing lists and receive information from us via email. So thank you, everyone. And before I forget, a reminder to please help us to shape the forum to meet your interests by completing the short post Zoom questions, which will pop up when you leave the meeting. And as this is the last one for the before the end of the year, can I at this point say, enjoy your Christmas, and we'll see you in 2023. So thank you and good evening.